Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me today, and also wanted to say thank you, Maxon, for organizing this event during this weird time when we all so separated, to give us this ability to connect and to share some knowledge and inspiration. So a couple words about myself. My name is Sasha Vinogradova. I'm an art director at the LA. You can find some of my work here. As you maybe know, Mill specializes in video production, motion graphics. We do lots of advertising, some titles for movies and TV shows, graphic for movies, music videos, AR, VR experience, and lots of things. So, wanted to share my reel with you.
Shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13. You've been working, but you're flirting with the weekend. You can freak out. 1 in a million. You're a gem shine when the light grows dim. Sing 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. We got the right stuff. We put the hammer right down. Wanna be like us? You better stick around. If you want it, you gotta prove it. Like we do it, like we do it. Groove with your hips and break it down. Stop when the clock hits 13. You've been learning and you're earning all of those hours. You can freak out. 1 in a million. Gonna shine bright and you never go dim. Sing it 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.
And I'm just going to scroll through some work while I'm talking. I started working in 3D almost 13 years ago. I do motion graphic for the last 4 years. Also, there was an extended period of time where when I was working mostly in key art, did lots of posters for movies and TV shows. Also do some book covers. And in most of my work, I really like to combine 2D and 3D. I think it gives you an awesome opportunity to get the best result in sometimes shortest period of time. One of my latest projects is the short film called Forest. If you don't mind, I'll share with you that one too. I just wanted to say that this short film had to premiere in a festival called Monster in Portugal, but unfortunately that animation festival got cancelled because of the coronavirus. So that is sort of a little premiere. So I hope you will like it. So yeah, wanted to really thank all the people who helped me to work on it, and all my beautiful Milk workers and Neil who helped to color it. So thank you very much. So let's jump into today's project. I called it Creating a Surreal Portrait Lily of the Valley. And that's what we're going to do today. As I said earlier, I came from a 2D background, and I really like combining 2D and 3D. I think it sometimes gives you an awesome result in a relevantly short period of time. And especially with things like portraits, it's really, really hard to create a realistic 3D portrait. But sometimes it's just easier to take a beautiful photograph and it will have all the life. And sometimes it's going to be just more impactful. So let's talk about the project. So workflow. Possibly this workflow is nothing new to you, but just to structure the presentation, I'm going to talk about it a little bit. So as any good project, you want to start with a sketch. I knew that I was going with a portrait, so I first found a stock image I liked, I bought it, and then I made a little sketch. I really like a nature theme, so and also I already had a material library with some megascans, some projects, some models I've done previously. Also, I wanted to show you guys my technique on how to plant moss. So I thought it would be nice to create this kind of look that nature is almost bursting from inside to outside. So that was the sketch. Then I jumped into ZBrush, where we're going to sculpt a rough sculpt of our portrait. Then we're going to bring that sculpt into Cinema and camera project our texture on that sculpt. Then we're going to set up our models. We're going to bring some existing models, going to model some new models. Then we're going to set up material and lighting. That's going to be Redshift. And then I'm not going to talk much about animation, but final render, some setup of the depth of field, and that's pretty much going to be the final result, which again is here. So let's jump into ZBrush sculpting. So let's talk about a couple highlights, how you can sculpt something like this in ZBrush. I'm not going to go through it in all the details, just highlights. Pretty much, I really like using this function see-through. You can put your photo underneath it and match your geometry. In this case, I didn't want to sculpt things from the ground zero, so I used some of the existing tools in ZBrush. If you look here, I used Julie for the body, and then from projects, I used Demo Head female, and I pretty much combined those two. I tried to match angle a little bit. I used this function here in document ZApp properties to store my view so I can always come back to it. Then very important function is draw cameras, so you can store your camera, and later on when you're done with sculpting, you're happy with that, you can export it through FBX export import. So you can use it here, export cameras. Obviously, I used lots of dynameshing and zero meshing to combine it into one shape. And in the end, in order to have lighter geometry, I used decimation master pretty much to triangulate my model and to have a lighter final model. I'm going to turn on fast forward of my process so you can see how I built that particular sculpt. And here I skip to my final result. So after you're done sculpting your portrait in ZBrush, you can bring it into Cinema by File, Merge, and your FBX. It already will have a camera. So now we would need to project our texture into our geometry. So let's create background. And let's create material, C4D material, apply to that background, and bring our image, stock image. Let's match the size of the render and document. I actually already did match it. Make sure it matches the photo you picked. So from here, I would match background in an exact way. I need things to be transparent, so I'm turning on X-ray. And without rotating camera, I'm just matching the size. I'm trying mostly to align nose and eyes. Cool. So now when everything is aligned, I can do my projections. It doesn't work straight away with Redshift material. You need to use Cinema 4D material to create projections. For that, you can apply that background material onto your geometry. Then click on material and change projection method to a camera mapping. From there, you can bring the camera, and you can see it, but it does not align a little bit because our ratio is not right. I need to change it to custom and calculate. So now it looks right, and in order to bake it so it would not change, I right click on material and click generate UV coordinates. So now it does not depend on a camera anymore. It is just our UVs. Let's do the same for the hair. Use our material, apply material, then change in projection method to camera mapping, bring our camera, change film aspect to custom, click calculate, right click on material, and click generate UV coordinates. Cool. So now I want to check how it looks, and for that I actually want to create Redshift material. And apply it to both portrait and the hair. Then open material, bring our texture, connect it to surface, and I'm going to change my layout to a Redshift layout. and turn on IPR. Cool. So our original resolution was huge. I just want to lock it and change it to something smaller. And in here, I'm going to duplicate the camera, not to lose it. I'm going to lock it and with the C4D tags. Okay. And in here, let's try to rotate and see. So yeah, that's how you would do 3D projection. Pretty cool. Okay, so from here, I'm going to jump into one of the files I did earlier. I'm going to do it a couple times through the whole process. So next step would be to break the shape. Before I started this model, I actually had a very rough sketch, which looked like this. So I knew I wanted to split her face in pieces and add some greenery sticking out. For that, I created Voronoi fracture, which you can find in here, Voronoi fracture, and put my head inside of it. Okay, in here, let me pause my IPR. You can see that if you go to source point generator, I did exponential and those settings, and then in object I offsetted fragments just a little bit to have the space between them. I clicked on whole object and added a slight thickness to my objects, so you can see that they're not just thin plates, but there is some geometry. Another important thing is to go to Voronoi selections and check inside faces and outside faces, so we can apply different materials on inside and outside. As you can see, I used my previous material and I grabbed a selection from here for outside faces, and I created just regular redshift material and apply it to inside faces. From here, everything got kind of heavy. My home machine is not extremely powerful, so I just collapsed everything. From here, I deleted some of the faces which I didn't needed to use, and also adjusted some pieces of her face to make some space between them that some plants are going to grow through. One thing which was bothering me, that inside faces had the same material as outside, and I needed them to have the same material as those sides. I couldn't find a better solution than just do it by hand. If you know better solution, please let me know. I'll just show you how I did it. Again, not ideal, but that's what it is. I would select my piece, then go to inside face selection, and then with UF, which is fill selection, and with Shift, add inside face I need, and go to select, set selection. So if you see, now it's the correct material. I had to repeat it with every piece, which was a little tedious. And again, let's do it again just so you can remember. I selected the part I needed, then selected the inside faces selection, UF, Shift, and select, and set selection. So it's correct. Cool. Because I don't want to do that again, I'll just going to switch to the next file where it's ready to go. So here, all the selections already finished, and I would like to bring some plants and set up materials and scene for this. So for the plants, I got this Maxon model of Lady of the Valley plant, but it, as you can see, it doesn't have actual flowers, and I really wanted to have flowers. So I decided just to model those separately and use texture from other Maxon model, from this one. So let's look into how to model flower for this. Okay, so I got some references of the flowers I wanted to build. I hope you will just remember them. I'm going to keep it on my second screen. Let's build it. Let's create new project. Create plane. Polygon, not plane. And change the size to 1 and 1 to make it a little bit more closer to real world size, and collapse it, C. So this is the base for my petal. I'm going to move my pivot point to the center, and I'm going to create cloner, put my polygon inside of the cloner, change it to linear, to radial, because there are 6 petals, and to change count to 6 and radius to 0. Cool. So this is the future flower. From here, I'm going to point selection, selecting both points with Shift, with the scale, bringing them closer. With space, I'm switching between 2 tools I used recently. I'm going to switch to edge selection. And from here, with holding Shift, I can extrude my edges. Also, with W, I can switch my coordinates from world to local. So in this case, I want world. Again with Shift, extruding. Okay. Then U B changes, selects this row of polygons. MM cuts it in half. Cool, I think it looks pretty good. I'm going to put it with Alt inside of the Turbo Smooth with subdivision surface, I'm sorry. Maybe to change things a little bit. Cool. I'm pretty happy with the way it looks. Maybe frames it. Maybe open it up a little bit more. Cool. Now I'm going to switch back and forth with my UVs and regular interface. Let's add some UVs to this petal. I'm going to UV edit. I'm going to bring this texture, not new texture, file, open texture, and we're going to bring this texture. So as you can see, it has nice petal. It doesn't match our shape, but it matches our general look. So I'm going to select all my polygons. I'm going to face it towards camera. I'm going to projection, and click frontal, and relax. And now when I'm going to bring my previous texture, I can match it. So I just need to place it where I need it. With space, I'm switching between tools. The flowers are really tiny, so I think it's fine if it's not ideal, but good enough. And so now I'm switching back to my standard. So petals are done. Let's model inside of the flower, those little tawns and this central part. For that, again, I create polygon, change the scale of this polygon. I'm going to hide my flower. With C, collapse it. Bring my pivot point to the center. With a scale, change the shape of it. Leave pivot mode, and O frames it. Come on, frame it. Frame it. Doesn't frame it for some reason. And from here, let's adjust the shape of it to look again approximately like this. It's thinner in the beginning and in the end. And then I'm going to do the same UB to select my ring selection, to split it apart. One more time, splits it more, and then I'm going to but move those ribs a little bit. Cool. And now I'm just going to duplicate the same cloner, remove my previous polygon, put it inside of this cloner. Let's unhide the flower. Cool, so I want to adjust flower a little bit. Let's change it to fix clone position so we can adjust it. Cool. Close enough. And then I'm going to place it again inside of my subdivision surface. But for now, let's create UVs. Again, let's go to UV edit. Select our model. Place it facing the camera. Go into projection, frontal, relax, file, open texture, and let's place it in here where we have this nice transition from white to yellow. I think it's a pretty cool spot. Rotating it 90 degrees, which is a little slow. Placing it and scaling it. Cool. Again, going back to our standard UI. This is good. And now let's create the middle part, which I create from disk. Again, small radius, 16 polygons is good. I collapse it with C. Here I'm going to move this point with KL, create an edge. Double click on edge, selects the edge, changing the shape. MS creates a little bit of bevel. Just in more shapes, maybe a couple more bevels if you would like. So yeah, this looks good to me. And same deal. Let's go to UV interface. In here, I'm selecting all my polygons. I would like to reverse my normals because they're flipped right now. Place it to the camera for projection. Go to projection, frontal. And again, file, open texture. So I need this gradient from white to yellow, which we have in approximately the same place. So place it there. Rotating it. Cool. And going back to the standard. From here, let's jump into the file I already built. That's how the final flower looks. As you can see, I added those stems here. They've been built with a sweep, and the same way I placed them where I needed to be on the texture. I didn't want to collapse this sweep because I wanted to have ability to control it if I need to. And the little leaves, same deal. So those are flowers. They're ready to go. And in the files, I opened Megascans. So I took just one part of it. I usually select it with double click. UP separates it. I deleted everything else. Took our flower, brought it to our scene. And everything a little bit bigger. The flower a little bit bigger. One thing about this flower, I wanted to change pivot so it matches the beginning of the stem. So it's a little easier to place and control. Okay, let's place it in the middle of the plant. Okay, and let's bring this into our scene. I'm going to open my final file, switch my UI on Redshift, and here let's talk about setting up the scene. So first of all, we need some lighting, and if I change this into the clay mode, you can see that the lighting I set up kind of matches the lighting of the image. We have one soft area light coming from the top corner, which is this light. Let me change my render to camera, to this camera, so I can rotate and still see in the same image. I'm also going to hide all those cameras. Cool. So see, I have this softbox area light. Then I have dome light. Without it, shadows are a little too dark, and you don't want to have such a black shadows. And also I have a little bit of point light coming from inside. Otherwise, it again look too dark and unnatural. So this was my lighting, and let's talk about materials. So first of all, I switched my material on the girl herself from just flat to a Redshift matte shadow catcher. That this node allows you to mimic shadows on flat images. So pretty much I grabbed the texture we used earlier for the girl and fed it into background in my matte shadow catcher. And that's where those shadows coming from. So if we would connect it straight, no shadows. With shadow catchers, there are shadows, which is super, super cool. And I use the same shadow catcher material on my planes for the background, which I just painted in Photoshop. And now let's look into our plant materials. So it's very simple setup. I just took textures from Megascans, fed albedo into diffuse color texture. Disregarded this one. I didn't change anything. I played with it a little bit, but then just default was better. The refraction, the translucency texture goes into refraction, and one thing you need to do is to mark thin walled, and my weight of the refraction is 0.5. For some reason, this model didn't have roughness, but it had glossiness, which is fine. You just need to invert it and you'll get roughness. Make sure you have gamma 1, because it should be in linear, because it's black and white map. Then I used displacement in my bump map. It's not really right, but I thought it looked good enough. And for the flowers, I used pretty much the same material, the different textures. I just really didn't use opacity for this because I didn't need to. Also, as you can see, I added some little grasses from another Megascan model. And that is pretty much it. That's how this scene was set up. Pretty simple. One thing I wanted to add to it was some moss and hair. So as you can see here, I have a little flyaway hair, which pretty much just a bunch of splines with hair simulation on it, and on hair I turned on wave just a little bit. And let's look into how I set up the moss. So if you ever try to Google it, there's this awesome tutorial which tells you how to make moss. I pretty much used the same method. It just I didn't use ZBrush for it. Let me start with new project. Save project as moss 02. And first of all, I'm going to top. Alt V brings me to this view, to the back, and in back I'm going to place this the moss texture from Megascans. So texture and this one. In that tutorial, the way they do that, they do it in ZBrush. I prefer doing it in Cinema. So same deal. I'm just going to create a polygon and then place it where I need it, hit C, and there's an awesome tool called ME, Polygon Pan, and pretty much I'm just doing very, very rough Polygon Pan modeling. You don't need to do it for every moss. Like if you want to have more variations, you are welcome to. I did just a couple and it was good enough. And here I'm just sort of doing like an overview how I did it, so it's not as detailed. But yeah, using Polygon Pan, pretty much with Control, I extrude those edges. With Control, I can delete it. And I'll just show it on example of those 5. A very important part of it is to match your corners of the texture. So if you match it here and then you bring your texture later on, it will just stick in right place. So I merge everything, connect objects and delete, and then from here I'm bringing my material. I'm bringing that texture of the moss, and I'm changing it to flat, making sure that it sits in the right plane. And this is the magical button, fit to object. So you can see it's not aligned because it's just not the right angle. So you just need to find that right angle. At some point you will. Oh, here I got it aligned, so perfect. And from here I'm doing generate UV coordinates. So now those polygons know that they belong in the right spot. I can delete my corners. Then I can separate those in groups. So now it's just separate polygons. One thing you would need to do is to place axis, the pivots in the right spot. And from here you want to make them look not as regular, so not as plain. And you can use soft selection if you want to. Pretty much to add some dimension to it. And now you can place them all in the center. Actually here. And if you place this into the cloner, that would be your moss. In my case, I already had moss from the other project. If you take a look, it's just lost. Yep. So here is just a bunch of moss parts. I try to keep it low poly, just because it's already heavy with so many instances. So I'm going to bring this moss into the scene, and I want to place it on the model, and I want to place it in very particular places. In order to control it, I'm going to use vertex map. For that, I'm going to merge everything. And because it came from a Voronoi fracture, it already has some of the vertex maps. And the only thing we need to do really here is to paint where we want it. So as you can see, I can just paint over it, and there are different brushes. So I don't want to have too much on her face. It's more about like edges. So I'm going to remove it from some places. I also can smooth it out if I want to. And then when I'm going to show how to apply it. So have our cloner ready, and change its settings to object. Change it instance mode to multi-instance, and put our object inside of it. I don't want to place too many instances right now, so I can just show you. Otherwise, it's a little too heavy. I usually boost up the number just for the final renders. So as you can see here, cloners are everywhere. Let's use our shader, and in shader, change scale to -1, and in fall off, let's place our vertex map into the fall off. We can make our moss just a little bit bigger. So in this way, we can control where we will have our cloners. Cool. So if we come back to our final file, which was file 11, and here's the final scene. I already added moss in here. It turned out pretty subtle, but I actually like that it's so subtle. And the only thing which is really left to do is to add some depth of field to your scene, because it really helps to blend 2D and 3D together. Here's actually how it looks with no depth of field, which looks fine too, but it just adds this nice final touch in the end. So yeah, we just need to click on override, enable, boost up amount of depth of field. I like keeping my aspect. This 0.66 means that it's pretty much like an anamorphic looking bokeh. Or bokeh, I'm not sure how to say that right. Also, I applied this image, which creates this nice color aberration effect. That is actually something I followed from Grayscale Gorilla's tutorial. And that's pretty much it. You can set up settings. You can optimize your render for the settings and animate your camera, and you are ready to go. And here I just wanted to show you a final result. Some of the different angles, a little bit of camera movement, and also wanted to show you the final comped image with a little love from Photoshop. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you again for watching. Again, my name is Sasha Vinogradova, and you can find my work in here. I hope you liked it.